A young woman in her 20s is waking up in the morning, getting herself ready for work. But this morning isn't the usual one. This morning she wakes up with the most intense migraine she has ever experienced. She gets herself ready for work regardless. She gets on her bike, commutes to work, and during the bike ride, she is experiencing that her entire reality feels like a surreal distortion. And when she finally makes it to work, she realizes that all the letters in the newspapers and on the advertisements and everywhere around her are suddenly strange and unfamiliar to her, unreadable. It could have been Greek for all she knows. And then she suddenly breaks down. The ambulance is called and she's taken to the hospital where she is sedated and falls asleep finally. And when she wakes up, she's staring at the ceiling, wondering what happened, wondering if maybe she had a stroke, a mental breakdown perhaps. She's thinking about her life, the way she's been living her life so far for all these years, thinking about her accomplishments or the lack thereof, thinking about all the things she could have done but never did because she didn't have the courage to do so, thinking back with intense regret, thinking back on her relationship that was a cycle of abuse, a cycle of a toxic, abusive relationship. And yet somehow she was still chasing after her old lover who showed no interest in her, but she felt a tremendous attachment and she was still chasing after the past. This young woman was me 3 years ago. This is the story of how ayahuasca has played a big part in my deeper spiritual awakening. 3 years ago, I had my very first ayahuasca ceremony. It was my very first psychedelic experience, my very first plant medicine experience. I've always considered myself a spiritual person throughout my whole life, but I have had many, many very deep, dark nights of the soul, if you want to call it that. I have struggled a lot with depression, intense self-loathing, intense anxiety, intense insecurity, social anxiety, very strong social anxiety. In fact, I couldn't look people in the eye for many years because I felt like they would probably uncover some kind of deep secret inside of me that I didn't want to be uncovered. And I often felt like I am a fraud, like I'm a fake, like I don't even have a right to exist, essentially. And I was so attached to my ex-partner, I couldn't let him go for many years, even though it was a destructive, abusive relationship where there was probably not a single day that passed in our relationship where we didn't argue and didn't scream at each other and fight and call each other names and try to control each other. It was not a happy or not a good relationship by any means. And somehow I was still very attached to it because in my mind I felt that we were supposed to be, it was meant to be, it was supposed to be us. I had this idea, this image in my mind that we were supposed to get married, have children, all of that stuff. But it didn't turn out that way. And for a long time, I had tremendous anxiety and I felt like my whole world collapsed, essentially. What triggered me to go on my very first ayahuasca experience was that I felt that something has to change in my life, because I understood that me chasing after the past, chasing after a relationship and a man who didn't care about me, didn't love me, chasing after something so toxic that we had wasn't gonna lead to anything positive for me. It wasn't going to bring anything positive into my life. Something had to change, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. I felt so lost. I felt like I was stuck, like nothing was moving forward. And I wasn't sure what to do about that. Because as I said, I had considered myself to be a spiritual person most of my life, but I never really had any deeper spiritual experiences. I never really had any supernatural or paranormal or anything that I would call a spiritual experience. Or perhaps I did, but I didn't see it that way. Or perhaps I was just not open yet to it, to understand it. But I never had anything special happen to me that many people talked about, like a Kundalini awakening, or their higher self communicating with them, or communicating with the dead, or their intuition, synchronicities, and none of that. I went to this place to have my very first experience, and I didn't know what to expect. I was really, I was kind of nervous and pretty scared too. I just went and I didn't tell anyone that I was going. So I was kind of wondering, okay, well, I'm here with a bunch of strangers. I might die, and no one's gonna know where I am. In hindsight, I probably should have told someone, but I felt like it's kind of it's a personal decision, and I just wanted to be alone by myself and without anyone knowing where I am. When the presentation round came, and everyone was telling their story and talking about who they are and giving an introduction, when it came to me, I broke down crying, because I was listening to everyone telling their story, talking about their accomplishment, having a family, having kids, a marriage, a home, a career, having created a life for themselves, or whatever. Like they just had something to call their own, somewhere to belong or someone to belong to. I felt like I had none of that. I wasn't in a place where I was happy at all. I felt like I had no meaning or purpose in my life. And I didn't like my job. I didn't have a partner. I was chasing after a guy who didn't care about me at all. And I thought that I might be single forever. I lived in a place that I could barely afford, that wasn't even mine. I was struggling financially. Like I was poor. Like I was very low income. I had to rely on friends and family for help to be able to pay the bills, essentially. I was not in a good place, let's just put it that way. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. No clue. None at all. I didn't even know what I was passionate about anymore. I used to love art when I was younger. I used to enjoy drawing and painting, but somehow even that somehow dried up. The inspiration just seemed to dry up. Nothing was flowing in my life, and I wasn't happy and I wasn't satisfied. Everything in life was just blah. I wasn't even living. It was just like a zombie mode, like autopilot. What happened the first night was something I didn't expect, because Every experience is different for everyone. My very first night, I had an experience where essentially it was like my mind opened up or expanded so much that there was a clarity there that I had never even thought possible before. A clarity where I could ask any question I wanted. And I probably would have found the accurate answer to any question I ever wanted to ask in the whole universe. But since my time was limited, I decided to focus on what was most important to me. So I was focusing on or getting answers to questions about what my purpose is and who am I and why am I here, and why have all the things happened to me in the past and things like that. And it was kind of like I liken the experience to the Russian babushka dolls, you know, the ones that are the the smaller. There's like, you open the larger one and there's a smaller one inside, you open that, there's a smaller, and and so on and so on until you find the smallest one, like the core. And it was kind of like that. It was kind of like peeling off the layers one by one, getting deeper and deeper until I reached the core of, like, the sum of all of my questions, all of my problems. I reached the very core, the essence of everything. It was the essence of existence itself. It's so funny because it was so simple. The answer was so simple. So simple that I just laugh at it. And the answer was love. I know that it may sound kind of hippie to some people, but that was the answer I got. That existence, the core of existence and the meaning of life is love. That experience was really profound for me because it opened the door to a deeper awakening. And what I mean by a deeper awakening is that it opened the door to love myself, to accept myself the way that I am, with everything that I am and everything that I have. And after my very first retreat, I, for the first time in my life, started to experience the number sequences coming, like 222, 333, 444, etc., 1111. I had heard many times from some of my friends that they saw these number sequences, especially waking up at night and suddenly it was 4:44 in the morning. I've never had that happen to me before, but I've heard it from many people. But after my very first retreat, I just started to see them like that everywhere, all the time. And it hasn't stopped. I still see them all the time, everywhere. So something happened. I don't know what, but something happened there energetically, like a door opened for me. After that, my life started to transform in ways that I didn't think possible. I couldn't even have imagined that before. The most profound love I have ever experienced was during my second retreat. I think this was my third ceremony. Before this, it was like the most divine, the most absolutely divine, kind, compassionate, joyful, loving, ecstatic energy washed all over me. I became one with this. I became this energy. I felt like I was being carried on essentially like a soft, warm, fuzzy bed of light. It was like I was being carried by God. I was being embraced in God's loving embrace. And it was the first time in my life that I ever experienced love, that I ever experienced real love, divine love, that which everything is made out of. It was the first time I looked at my hands. I held up my hands and I looked at them and I said, oh my God, these are the most beautiful hands I've ever seen. And I ran my hands all over my body, just feeling my skin, feeling my curves, caressing every inch of my body. And I was just like feeling so happy, so grateful for being me, so blessed. I will never forget that experience because that set the tone for the rest of my life up until this point. That really was the beginning of my new life. This is part one. I will go deeper into my experience in part two. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. There's kids behind me, so please excuse that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if this was helpful to you, then please share with someone. Maybe it can help someone else too. Thank you for watching, and please leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in the next part. Namaste.